Could the new Mario Kart be a cross-gen title? This was recently raised on the Digital Foundry analysis video for the Switch 2 launch, and it's something I did spend a bit of time discussing in a video a few months ago. On the surface, this might seem like an absolutely mad idea. Mario Kart is such a system seller, and so by definition a system seller should be exclusive to the system that you want to sell. We also know that Nintendo would like to graduate players expeditiously over to the new machine, but the fact that the new game seems to be demonstrating only quite subtle graphical improvements over and above the previous title means it seems at least feasible that this could be positioned as a cross-gen title, and I think the arguments for and against cross-gen Mario Kart are closer run than they might initially appear. In this video, I'm going to explore some of the ways that cross-gen Mario Kart could work out well for Nintendo, the reasons mitigating against such an approach, and I would like to sketch out a couple more speculative third options which Nintendo could also use to give Switch players a foothold in the new Mario Kart game, even if they're not all in. Let's start by rehearsing the arguments for a cross-gen Mario Kart then. Most simply, Nintendo has a couple of times in the past made its launch title cross-gen, and with Mario Kart being the first game we've seen, it has to have a decent chance of being the Switch 2's launch game. Now, to be fair, they still don't do this very often, and in the two cases prior, it was because they were launching the highly experimental Wii and Switch, where they had much deeper concerns about whether the launch would be successful, and at least they had the belt and braces of a previous console's install base to fall back on. Still, any new console launch is likely to be a cause for nervousness, and the Switch has an install base of 150 million and counting. Yes, Mario Kart will continue to sell and sell over the years, but a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, and the 2025 to 2026 financial year is going to be a relatively risky one for Nintendo's balance sheets in certain respects. They need to sell a massive number of new systems, but even if they do, the Switch 2 will still likely have a smaller profit margin than the older devices, where the processes are far more established and savings have been made from the increased efficiency of mass production, so-called economies of scale, which have kept production costs low. Now, the Switch 2 will eventually have a good margin as well, as I'm 90% sure that it will be confirmed that the system was not designed to run at a loss and only would if there is a sharp change in currency values after or around launch. But while they would usually rest on the Switch, that system is in a bit of a decline. It's possible to arrest that decline with smart moves. The 2017 to 18 year on the 3DS saw the console sell 6.4 million, which wasn't far down on the 7.27 million from 2016 to 2017. But couple this with decreased game sales of both legacy titles and of Switch 2 games, which will have a smaller install base to sell to, and the coming financial year has tricky elements for the company in the short term. What they really could do with, therefore, is a title capable of selling 20 or 30 million on the legacy Switch. Pokémon Legends ZA may be one title that could at least approach these numbers, between 10 and 20 million on Switch 1 by the end of the financial year ending 2026 is my 70% forecast, and although the precise profit split from that game won't all accrue to Nintendo, as they're publishing the title as well as co-producing it through the Pokémon Company, they must at least get a healthy taste. But add Mario Kart to the mix, and you really shore up profits in this year. This might seem kind of short-termist, and Nintendo of all companies has a great amount in reserve and likes to play the long game, but there are more reasons still to consider a cross-gen Mario Kart. Another consideration is that while Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has had absolutely colossal sales, there's no doubt that a large amount of this has been from being a pack-in game on a highly successful system. Wii Sports was the same back in the day. Now, these games are precious because people buy the machines with an eye on the games, but that doesn't necessarily mean that these are the only titles that could have this kind of sales effect. 2D Mario and the aforementioned Wii Sports also have great pack-in potential, and Nintendo may well feel that there are other titles which are ripe for a bit of a push. And actually, one possibility could be none other than a future Switch 2 Mario Kart. Yes, Nintendo's usual strategy is one release per system lifespan, and they must be aware of the risks of marketplace confusion. But nevertheless, with Splatoon, Zelda, 3D Mario, and 2D Mario, the Switch has seen 2 entries in each series, albeit including ports. There has even been a second Mario Kart title on the Switch 1, the quickly forgotten but whimsically fun Mario Kart Live Home Circuit. Now, they won't want another Mario Kart game that exactly replicates the prior one. Even with titles like Zelda and 3D Mario, we see a big drop-off in terms of sales between the first and second titles, where they are iterative and directly linked. The sales of Super Mario Galaxy 2 or Zelda Tears of the Kingdom are sad testaments to that, despite being more refined experiences than their predecessors in so many ways. But let's say that they did want to do a massive Diddy Kong racing style adventure mode, or even go full on Forza and make an open world karting game. Well, this could be such a massive expansion of Mario Kart that it would warrant its own separate style of game. Such an innovative title would allow them to stagger their releases effectively by adding this title later in the Switch 2's life. Another option, of course, is that they could do a separate Super Smash Kart game with its own flavour, thereby keeping Mario Kart but still creating a new racing experience that is a shop window title for their wealth of game franchises. Either way, this makes them rely on the 2025 Mario Kart far less to be another all-singing, all-dancing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe experience. They can deliver the tried and true to their existing audience on day one, while subtly nudging them over to the new system, while a few years on, they're ready for a major new Mario Kart title that is not just Switch 2 exclusive, but is a real statement piece for the system. This would then become the packing game and would continue to sell. This would make the 2025 Mario Kart need to focus, by contrast, primarily on the potential for competitive online play, and there are hints that they're going very big with this, with the apparent revelation of not just 12, but 24 racing slots per game, meaning that this title could be bigger than ever. Nintendo really want to emphasize online play, not least because they sell an online service, and that regular trickle of income is hugely valuable to them. They desperately need to keep people on the service, and while it has been built up extensively, they have done this significantly in recent years on the back of Mario Kart with the Booster Course Pass. If they want to keep people on board, and that regular trickle of income and near guarantee of regular eyeballs on their products is surely more valuable to them than any singular game release, then it makes sense to offer them a Mario Kart experience on the online service. I have commented before that with Everybody Want to Switch and Mario Party Jamboree, they are really looking to push massive multiplayer titles. I still think there's a decent chance we will get another casual title of this nature for Switch, perhaps a new WarioWare that delivers the same this Christmas. But if Mario Kart is Switch 1 compatible, then obviously this would be a huge deal in this respect. And it solves another problem for Nintendo, the Switch 1 holiday title. 2024 had Super Mario Party Jamboree, 2023 had Super Mario Bros. Wonder. They do like to have a huge selling title on their books for the holiday season, with even 2017's 3DS lineup having Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon in November 2017. Mario Kart would clearly be a far bigger deal than either of these prior Mario Switch games, but it would still fit the slot beautifully, and in fact, it would be even better than any prior holiday title from Nintendo's point of view, in that they could sell it for $70. Yes, I think 90% likely the new Mario Kart will join Tears of the Kingdom in the $70 bracket. I just don't see this affecting sales, or certainly not in the short term, and if it is Switch 2 compatible, then they have their rationale built in. In fact, with Switch 1 owners bolstering early sales, dare I say that they might want to see the game positioned in the media conversation right alongside GTA. There will be media pieces run about such a big game, and either the narrative will be that GTA is the hugest selling thing in creation, and by the way, there's Mario Kart as well, Or they can unleash the potential of Mario Kart by letting the massive Switch 1 install base get a taste, in which case the argument would be, yes, there are two massive racing titles this holiday, GTA and Mario Kart. If they can use Mario Kart to muscle into that conversation, it surely has to be a positive for them. Now, before we get too carried away, there are clear reasons why Nintendo should not go down this route as well. While I've sketched out some solutions around pack-ins, the fact is that Mario Kart does shift systems, and they can't guarantee that 2D Mario or Switch Sports would do the same. In fact, I recently reviewed their holiday bundles, and it was curious that although they had pack-ins for all three titles, not all regions decided to push all of them. Admittedly, with America seemingly the territory where Mario Kart has the strongest pack-in appeal, they had both OLED and original Switch Mario Kart bundles. It also seems to me that this market might be the most receptive to a Forza Diddy Kong Mario Kart style mashup if they did go down that route. But it may still seem unwise to upset such a certain thing by introducing a level of confusion. You want people buying a Switch 2 with Mario Kart, not necessarily going to buy a Switch 2 and then pausing because, hey, why are there two Mario Karts? I imagine Nintendo's marketing team could get around this with how they title, package, and promote the new games, but you still have to put yourself in the shoes of the most ultra-casual consumer who will be purchasing the machines often for somebody else, and see whether it is clear what is being advertised. But the other massive drawback to a cross-platform Mario Kart is that it would surely hamper sales of the Switch 2 right away, as it takes away that necessity to buy early on. You always need with a new console a game at launch that is the reason to buy the machine. Sure, an upgraded system will sell well. 5.8 million people bought Switch OLED in the first 5 months on the market, and all that really had going for it was a better screen and slightly better internet capabilities. This is a far more compelling upgrade offer, and I think we can 90% expect that sales will eclipse 5.8 million within the first 2 quarters. And yet, I would argue that for the early consumers who will be among the most dedicated Switch fans, there are many games that could serve this purpose, from surely a bevy of third-party titles to any new first-party titles that Nintendo can launch for Switch 2 exclusively. And surely the reason to buy title would have to be a new 3D Mario title. If Mario Kart is the safety-first cross-gen title, then 3D Mario gets to absolutely blow the doors off with ambitious visuals and huge scope that could never have been dreamt of on the meager Switch 1. However, this would be a much softer sell than going with Mario Kart. There has never been a cross-gen Mario Kart game previously, and it might seem odd for them to start now. But I mentioned at the start of the video the possibility of a middle path, and this I think comes down to how they will decide to package their games in the coming generation. Traditionally, new systems get newly designed boxes, and there's certainly good reasons to do this. Not least, the current Switch boxes waste a huge amount of plastic, and I'm sure they could cut down on material, storage, and transport costs per game considerably just by shrinking them down. But for physical collectors, of which there are still many on the Switch, it makes sense to emphasize the continuity over the change if they want to keep people in the Switch series ecosystem. So what if instead of having discrete packaging for Switch 1 and Switch 2, two different stock keeping units, in other words, a Mario Kart Switch and a Mario Kart for Switch 2, they keep the same broad look of the Switch dressing and simply add a Switch 2 logo alongside the Switch 1 logo on the packaging, a demonstration that this title works for both. They could advertise it not as the game being backward compatible, but rather it being forward compatible for owners who later want to upgrade. There is the risk of confusion with something like this, as generally each system has its own product dressing. I would imagine they would need a big banner, compatible with Switch and Switch 2, at the top. But if they wanted a title that broke the barrier and allowed people to understand that the same games would work for both, it would have to be Mario Kart. This would mean that potentially 20 million people who don't own a Switch 2 would nevertheless already own a Switch 2 game. It would also avoid the odd segregation of the older titles from the new, as Switch 1 dressings would look pretty much the same as Switch 2, and so they could continue to keep selling games like Super Mario Bros. Wonder with a modern feeling game packaging, since the current Switch look would still be more or less the standard. They would need to slap their big warnings on games that are Switch 2 exclusives, but they're not averse to this kind of thing, and if they can avoid 2 stock-keeping units for a cross-gen Mario Kart and simply release one cart that serves both consoles, it would mean that people wouldn't need to feel like they are making a deliberate choice. They wouldn't be opting for a Switch 1 Mario Kart and therefore effectively making a conscious choice to forego Switch 2. A subtle decision, but one which might in itself make people feel more distanced from the Switch ecosystem going forward. They would simply be buying the new Mario Kart game, a game which looks fine on their existing model, but would be a better experience on the newest machine. This would activate the social effect as well. If people can take the new Mario Kart to friends and play in groups, the likelihood will rise that people will be playing with both Switch 1 and Switch 2 side by side, and the new system will, in theory at least, sell itself as people experience the improvement. All of which activates what is called the sunk cost effect. Basically, once people have paid for something, it is often oddly easier to get them to pay more, because they already feel invested. If people buy the new Mario Kart and it is a Switch 2 game, it surely feels like a more logical step to later buy a Switch 2. But then Nintendo get to gild the lily. Look at Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. The game started out as basically a direct port of the Wii U offering with DLC included. Granted, it had a few extra modes, but I suspect only die-hard Mario Kart devotees were going to double dip just for that if they had already splashed out on the Wii U DLC. But then they did get those people on board in the end by releasing the Booster Course Pass, which was Mario Kart 8 Deluxe exclusive. I could see a similar strategy working here. They get people into the 2025 Mario Kart on day one, perhaps they continue to offer DLC for a year or two, but at some point they tilt to DLC that is Switch 2 exclusive. And then they can justify this fairly easily by saying the DLC just requires the ambitious processing power of the Switch 2. Nobody can really complain too much that the cross-gen title that they've been playing for 3 years has a new mode that isn't compatible with 11-year-old hardware Nintendo has stopped producing after all. Another softer version of the same kind of thing is to offer the game exclusively to Switch owners who are part of Nintendo Switch Online. We know that they have experimented with streaming titles, with streaming exclusive titles like Kingdom Hearts, and while for first-party titles they've never streamed anything as vast as Mario Kart, it's an online-focused game anyway, so it makes some degree of sense. If there was a version of the game that was accessible to Nintendo Switch Online subscribers, perhaps even just a taster of the game, it would doubtless encourage people to hop on board. They could open up particular tracks on a limited basis, or maybe just have a Splatoon 3 test fire style situation where you can play the game for a limited period to get a taster. I think the Nintendo Switch Online exclusivity option probably has more appeal to them than the test fire route because it keeps people in their subscription service longer, but either would have the desired effect of whetting people's appetite for the new game on the new system while still providing gameplay for legacy Switch owners. In terms of forecasting, obviously the default assumption must be that they won't make the title cross-gen. Despite rare exceptions, this isn't something that Nintendo has done before with Mario Kart. But I do think that there are some persuasive reasons why they could benefit from a cross-gen title, and ways that I think they could leverage Mario Kart not just for short-term sales, but for long-term engagement through the Nintendo Switch Online service, and by making people feel already invested in the Switch 2 ecosystem. And so I feel there has to be a 50% chance that we will see this new Mario Kart playable in some form on Switch 1 by the end of the 2025-26 financial year. For more on the Mario Kart developers, you might want to check out my EPT9 deep dive from back along. And thank you as ever to my Patreon supporters, to the wonderful people in the comments section, and I shall see you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.